Welcome to Mentoring in Real Life, where we talk about what it takes to find and be a great mentor. I'm Angela, and together with my co-host Bill, we know the power of mentoring and what it can do in your life on both sides of the table. If you're interested in learning tips, tricks, and hearing stories about mentoring, you're in the right place. Come join us. Well, good afternoon, Bill. How are you?
Well, I've never been this happy. How about you, Angela?
I am tippy-tappy.
Well, we are very pleased to have Dr. Keith Dorsey on board with us today. As it turns out, Dr. Dorsey is a board strategist, researcher, and speaker who helps executives translate leadership success into boardroom impact. As author of The Boardroom Journey, he guides leaders on pathways to corporate board service. A former managing partner of CEO and board services at a global executive search firm, Keith has advised Fortune 500 companies for over 2 decades on governance, succession, and leadership strategy. His work has appeared in the Harvard Business Review, MIT Sloan Management Review, and Forbes, where he writes on leadership, diversity, and board effectiveness. He holds a doctorate in organizational change and leadership from the University of Southern California and an MBA from the Pepperdine Graziadio Business School.
Bill,
Keith,
Go ahead.
Go ahead. What?
I was going to say, I feel like we got to up our game. We got the big brain with us.
We always have to up our game with other brains. So in any case, Keith, thanks very much for offering to share your wisdom from years of successful leadership and mentoring today. Anything you'd like to add to that introduction before we get into it?
Not at all. Thank you. Can I take you to wherever I go to next, just so that you can introduce me? It sounds much better coming from you all.
We'll go wherever you want to go, Keith.
Angela and Bill, it's great to be here. Thanks.
Well, thanks very much. So if we could just sort of get into it, can you start off by telling us about a time that mentoring had an impact on you?
You know, I've been fortunate to have had mentors throughout my career. And I can think of, every single decade that I have been working, there was always someone that kind of pushed the right buttons to help me get there, even from my 11th grade English teacher who set me, on a different course. But, one mentor that later became a sponsor I can think about right now. And, I shared a little bit of this story with the two of you, would love to share more with many. And she, we were at this Fortune 500 company. I was the executive vice president and global head of sales at the time. And she really liked what I was doing within the organization and the subculture that I was able to create, especially around engagement. And she said, Keith, I've been watching you for the past couple of years. Would love to spend more time with you and become your mentor. And we set up it was initially a monthly meeting, then it kind of went into a bi-weekly meeting. And then she just kind of slipped into a sponsorship sort of role. And when she did that, one of the things that she said to me at the time was, Keith, I can see you as our next chief operating officer in the organization. And I said, really? Tell me more. And she said, just based on the things that you've done, the relationships you've built, how you partner with the various business units, so on and so forth, I really think that should be your next big step. And it caught me completely off guard, and I gave her a response that I think caught her off guard, and I said, can I have a couple of weeks to think about this? She kind of had this little, well, if you need to, yes, but I think this is right for you. And then I did. I took 2 weeks to think about it. When we met up the very next time, I told her, look, I've given this a lot of thought. Income-wise, let me just share my thoughts. Income-wise, income's going to be pretty much the same as what I'm doing right now. I said, responsibility wise, I feel, the type of things that I'm doing for the organization globally at this particular point, and some of the strategic things that we have coming up in the near future, are things that I think I really should be involved in just for our company's sake, especially from an M&A standpoint. And so after a lot of consideration and thought over the past 2 weeks, I'm going to decline the opportunity to move forward, and with your suggestion. And I watched her facial expression just change.
Sure.
And you know what? She was an incredible mentor and a huge supporter. And then in that case, it kind of moved into a sponsoring sort of role. And I let her down. And what I learned from that scenario is that I kind of let myself down as well. I was in my comfort zone in my vertical area as an executive vice president and global head of sales. And I've always been in that sales arena. And to make the shift that she was recommending, career-wise, and especially serving on boards like I do today, I think it would have served me well. I thought I was making a decision that showed what kind of supporter I was for the company, and that I was putting the company ahead of myself by saying, you need me right where I am based on everything else that's going on in our world and our business right now. And I thought I was putting on that hat, and she was going to jump out of her chair, high five me, and say, Keith, I just love you. And instead, our relationship changed after that to a certain degree, because she was really in my corner and willing to do whatever it took to help me continue to move up the ladder and accomplish personal and professional goals. And I kind of let her down. And since then, I've reflected on some things that both of us, the mentor and the sponsor and her, and the mentee and the employee and me, could have done differently to get different results. And I'll pause right there because that might be something you want to dive into later. But that was still a great mentoring relationship that, like I said, matriculated into sponsorship. And there are some lessons there.
It certainly feels like she was helping you to connect some dots for where you perhaps ought to be going in her view of life.
Yes.
And so, I mean, that's a point that we've talked about with mentors, is helping see a much bigger picture than necessarily that the mentee might see.
Yes.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about how that changed you and your views about what the future should look like for yourself.
And it also changed me as a mentor and a sponsor as
Sure.
well. I learned from it. One of the things that I think we do as mentors and sponsors, we're often mentoring and sponsoring a hypo. And we have such an incredible opinion about that high performance individual that we assume they know everything. Their mindset is completely right, and we can just help tweak a little bit here and tweak a little bit there, keep them in bounds like sonar. But for the most part, they have all the raw talent that we actually need, and we put them on such a pedestal that is sometimes not fair. And I think that's what my sponsor did to me. And what I didn't realize that she assumed I realized was that next role. I was already serving on Pepperdine's business school board, and she knew I had boards that I was somewhat interested in, corporate boards, because at that time a Fortune 1000 company reached out to me. Even though I was an employee at a Fortune 500, they reached out to me to serve on their board. And ultimately, I couldn't serve on their board because of a conflict of interest situation. So my sponsor knew that I had board aspirations. And so I think what she was doing was trying to get me to move from out of that sales vertical into a more ops vertical, because boards would see me as that much more attractive candidate down the road. And she probably thought I was able to connect those dots myself. But I wasn't thinking that way. I was thinking about compensation. I was thinking about where the company actually needed me at that particular point. I wasn't thinking strategically and intentionally about my next chapter that would involve so much more corporate, private and public corporate board opportunities. She was. And so what I learned from that scenario is no matter how much you respect and love and admire the tenacity and all the great things about the person you're mentoring or sponsoring, sometimes you still have to connect the dot. Even or the dots, even when they are actually making a bad decision. There's a saying that I have. It comes back from those old commercials we used to hear. Friends don't let friends drive drunk.
Right.
What I'm saying is good consultants don't let their clients make bad decisions. And so as a sponsor, as a mentor, if we think the person we're sponsoring or mentoring is making a bad decision, let's hit the timeout button for a second and say, let's talk about why you think what you just said is the right thing, not only for you, but the company. Here's why I recommend what I recommended. And here's what I'm thinking strategically for you. Have you given that some thought as well? And if I were to say absolutely, then it is what it is. But I probably would have said, oh my God, I wasn't even thinking about it that way. Let's continue to move forward. So hindsight being 2020, that's what I wish would have happened. It all worked out. I'm serving on boards today. My career naturally did the things it needed to do to make me attractive to boards. So it all worked out, but it would have been even better if I would have served as a COO for another 2, 3, 4 years. And so as a sponsor and mentor, ally, role model for others, I do say time out. Let's talk about it. And here's what I'm thinking, and these are the business reasons behind it. And even if they're tracking with me and I'm preaching to the choir, at least it's on record. And sometimes what I find, and they give me that nonverbal where they kind of look up to the left and they say, that's interesting. Tell me more.
Right. It certainly sounds like the learning moment for you was recognizing if that your mentor at the time had said that, let's take the time out, let's think about this a little bit, it very well may have changed the way you were looking at the situation.
It definitely would have, and I would have moved from that little story that I told myself that she was going to jump out of her chair, high five me, and say, I love the way you think. I love that you put the company first in these scenarios, and you don't let us hurt ourselves. You are needed there. And when that didn't happen and her facial expression changed and she wasn't as enthusiastic about mentoring me and sponsoring me in the future, I kind of let her down in that scenario. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When you're talking about hypo or high potential employees, right? You described yourself as a hypo in your lane of sales, global sales management, right? And it's interesting because what you were saying is that if your mentor had talked to you not only about the business side of why she wanted you to be the COO, but also the breadth of experience on how it would help you and support your own growth and career. Because a lot of those high potential employees, we actually want them to grow in their breadth of experience. And Bill and I have talked about this in previous episodes and how mentors can really help that would have given you a different perspective and a lens, because like you're saying, especially when we're in leadership roles, we see our high potential employees and think, these people got it. Like they are so high speed, low drag, man. Feed them and watch them blossom, right? But we still need some guidance. Those hypos still need some guidance. Yeah.
That's it, Angela. And what I've learned to do is to think about it from a situational leadership standpoint. And in situational leadership, you don't look at the individual as this is how they are from a development level. You look at the individual and you think about what are their development levels in each task. And so this one high performing individual can be unconsciously incompetent on this task, consciously incompetent on another task, and then consciously competent on a third, and unconsciously competent on a fourth. And so we tend to think that that hypo is unconsciously competent in everything because we're looking at the individual. But as leaders and as mentors and as sponsors, when it comes to wherever area that we're working with he or she on, we should look at their development level for that area alone and not that holistic hypo. Mm-hmm. And I think the key there is to break it into situational leadership.
Yeah. You know, you've used a few different terms that I'd love to hear your definition of. One being mentors, one being sponsors. Then I also heard you use the term allies. How would you distinguish between them?
You know, sometimes that one person can fill all of those categories, but I would say a mentor, that's that person that either was assigned to you to be a mentor in a formal program or naturally gravitated towards you as a mentor, that person that wants to help you accomplish the things that you want to accomplish, or the company said they would like you to improve in, that mentor that comes in to actually help. But the organic scenarios where you just kind of naturally fall into that relationship as opposed to that formal program, those are the best. And so that's, you know, how I would just quickly define a mentor. And then you have a sponsor that typically started in some sort of mentoring sort of relationship that not only wants you to succeed in whatever your goals, either their personal or professional goals, but they're actually seeking other scenarios for that you would be a great fit, and they're sponsoring you for it. They're actually laying the groundwork, doing things behind the scenes that actually make certain that you get that role that they think is the right role for you next. So they're sponsoring you, you know, in that scenario. And then the ally. The ally is often someone that doesn't look like you. And if you're a female, the ally might be a male. If you're a person of color, the ally might be a white individual. There are many different types of allies, and then you have the intersectionality of all of them. Someone could be, you know, a different gender, a different race, as well as, you know, really wanting you to continue to improve in certain areas, and they're mentoring you there and telling you what's around the corner, reminding you of various things and helping you risk mitigate your path. And they're also securing the next role for you as well and whispering in other people's ears as a sponsor. So, yeah, that's the way I would define those three.
Yeah, it fits very well. We had recently talked about the difference between mentors and advocates, and I think our advocate term is your sponsor term. The term's not important. The function that they're performing is the important part, obviously. And so we certainly have talked about the importance of having advocates/sponsors to be talking good about you when you're not in the room. Absolutely. Telling the other senior people how important it is that they consider you for this next opportunity, et cetera. So yeah, we're completely aligned on that set of thoughts.
You know, Bill, I had a mentor once at one point in my career when I was in middle management, and I reported up to her, and she believed in me so much that she knew she was getting to a point in her career, one, where she wanted to relocate, two, where she didn't want to have to work as much as she was working at that particular point. She didn't want to have to develop any new muscles. She actually wanted to go back and just have an easier path and a simpler life to begin to move into semi-retirement. She was my boss. She was my mentor, and she became my sponsor because she actually moved into my old role and I moved into her role, and she was laying the groundwork for months, way before I actually knew. So she sponsored me in a succession plan to replace her and took my role, moved from California to Chicago where I was, and made certain that her role that she had, that senior role that she had in California, I can work from Chicago. And she took over my middle management team, that team that I was managing, and moved to Chicago, had a simpler lifestyle, and I became her boss. Didn't have to move my family, and then moved on from there. So it's amazing how people can do things as a strong mentor, a strong sponsor, and orchestrate things without even your knowledge.
Yeah, fantastic discussion, and we should all have we should all have sponsors like that who are dying to have us fill their new job. So you mentioned a couple times now. That person was in fact a mentor and also your boss,
Yes.
and so we've had discussion about whether your best mentor. Certainly, bosses can be mentors, but we've also had a discussion about the need for more than one mentor because you don't just want somebody who's in your direct performance evaluation chain
Yes.
deciding all that stuff. So have you had experience with, mentors both in and out of your chain of command?
Absolutely, and I've also conducted studies myself and really interviewed very successful executives who had a successful executive career and then moved on into board careers. And I remember one saying one of her best days was when she realized she can have more than one mentor. The company said, we want our hypos to pick a mentor. And so she picked someone that was a very good friend of hers and has been a mentor. And she wrote that person's name down as a mentor. And then that person, when he found out that she wrote her name, his name down, he called her and he said, I'm declining to be your mentor in this program. And she was hurt. And she said, why are you declining? He said, because you already have me. I'm not going anywhere. Here's an opportunity for you to pick someone else in addition to me to mentor you. And she said, but you're giving me what I need. She said, no, you're looking at it more holistically. Think about where you would like to go. You would like to be our large company's next CEO or CEO down the road. And think about those people that are in those roles and the many different skill sets they exhibit and some of the competencies that they exhibit, and then evaluate your own skill sets and competencies and how do they match up with the individuals that are in those sort of roles today. And then say, where do I have gaps? And how can I begin to improve on those gaps? And I want you to find mentors that can help you fill those gaps. And many people think I need to pick someone who fills the majority of those gaps because I think they're outstanding. And I assume they're going to be able to help me in all these other areas like public speaking and writing and P&L management. And you start to think about all these functions. And why put that much pressure on a mentor to stretch outside their comfort areas because you only want one mentor? Or begin to look at the areas where you have gaps and say, Mary's an excellent public speaker. I wonder if I could take Mary to lunch and just see if she would be interested in mentoring me from a public speaking standpoint. But I also am weak on sales. Maybe Mary can help me there. And then you think, and Mary's, I'm not a salesperson. No, so you go out and you find a strong mentor for sales and a strong mentor for financial acumen, if those are your gaps. And so that was eye-opening for her. And she said her career took off when she realized and stopped giggling about the fact I can have more than one mentor.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We call it having a personal board of directors or personal board of mentors.
Yes.
And not only in the different aspects of your career growth like you're talking about, but also your life. You know, having mentors outside of work and for those of us that like to have a life outside of work, have mentors in the areas that we want to improve in outside of work as well.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
But to just take your favorite aunt or your favorite uncle and say, I want you to be my mentor, because you've had this successful career, that can it work? Absolutely. But it really, if you can go with the best in class sort of model, seek mentors that are best in class in the areas that you truly need mentoring.
Yeah, it's better to have at least one than none at all. But yeah, I agree that the idea of looking for best in class is going to make you set up in your career for the best opportunities.
Well, a question that we've had very related to this that I would love to hear your take on is so let's say you've identified that potential best in class mentor that you'd love to have. What was your approach to getting them to be your mentor? I mean, particularly if you don't know them particularly well.
Yeah. I found being more interested than interesting was the secret. And what I mean by that is that actually do research on yourself, reflect on what you need, find those gaps, do research on your personal vision, mission, and values, because you could pick someone who can help you fill a gap, but if there's a misalignment on values, they're going to recommend things that won't sit well with you, or they're going to ask you to try to mentor you to do things their way that's not right for you. So the first step is to do what you've been paid to do for other companies so many times, that whole vision, mission, values, those sort of exercises, but take a step back, reflect, and do it on yourself. Once you do that and you find these people that are best in class in specific areas, then actually see if they are a good fit for you. Do you have similar values? Do you have similar visions? Do you have similar missions? Because that part is important. You don't want someone recommending you to do something that's not a fit for you. For instance, if someone is great at networking and small talk, I mean, absolutely great at it. And I don't care how much mentoring, how much education, how many books you've actually read about it. It's not a part of your introverted personality, and it's never going to fit. So seeking that person as a mentor who's great at squeezing palms, kissing babies, quick one-liner jokes and everything else, and that's not you, it's not going, that mentoring relationship for that gap isn't going to work. What are you trying to solve by fixing that area around networking? And then say, I need to broaden my social capital, my network, and then think about the many different ways that you can broaden your network. Is that via speaking? Is that via writing? Is that via social events? And then find your mentor that's good at that type of network building, not just a network building mentor.
Right.
It is important.
Yeah. You today, Keith, are primarily focused on how to support people who have an interest in serving on boards.
Yeah.
What have you noticed as some of the biggest obstacles in getting them guidance and advice?
Boards and your career. So I think about mentors and sponsors in two different categories. You should have your career mentors and sponsors, and you should have a different set of board mentors and sponsors, because what's required to be an effective executive may not be the same requirements and attributes to be an effective governance person on boards. And so to really think about your mentors and sponsors from those perspectives as well. And so I say when you're focused on getting on boards, begin to find people that are already serving on boards. And to further answer Bill's question and yours, Angela, is once you uncover the right type of person, now you need to build relationships. And the best way to build relationship, as I said, is to be more interested than interesting. People love to help. Ask thought-provoking questions. Ask for, a half an hour breakfast, coffee, lunch. People have to eat. People drink, whatever the case. And don't expect them to buy. You go and say, I would love for you to just have a conversation. I love your career. I like your path, and I would love to just pick your brains about how you actually got to where you are. And I just want to take an opportunity to learn. And what people find when you are more interested and curious than interesting, people can relate to you, and they walk away from that meeting still rubbing their head trying to figure out why they like you so much. It's like that first date when someone asked you questions throughout that first date. And the saying is, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And you think about a good first date is when they asked you all these thought-provoking questions and you were just chatting away. A bad first date is when you couldn't get a word in edgewise because all they did was tell you how interesting and great you are. They are. And so I find when you are seeking a mentor, not so much a sponsor, but seeking a mentor, to be able to ask for some time and really genuinely be interested in them. They walk away wanting, in a reciprocal sort of way, to find out more about you. Can we meet up again? It'd be great to have another meal. I have so many questions. I would like to know more about you. But that was their idea, not yours. And because they felt good, because you had them thinking about things they haven't thought about in a while. And they're telling their story, and their endorphins are off the chart. And they just leave liking you. And before you know it, they're actually saying, I would love to mentor you. And why is that? Because one, you created an environment that sounds like it could be the beginning of a trusting environment. And two, they began to like your questions, the way you formed your questions, the way you peeled it back, second, third, fourth level questions, the not superficial, like, okay, thanks. And now you go to a completely unrelated question, but it was the peeling of the onion, and they begin to like the way you think. And what I found is true about mentors and sponsors, they love to hitch their wagon to a person that's going places. Because what's in it for them is to say, I knew them when, and guess what? I kind of helped them get it there.
Right. Sure.
There's that altruistic egoism in it, to a certain degree, and I think that's the best way to find your next mentor is by really being curious, genuinely curious about their path.
Well, and in getting mentors with respect to getting on boards, you wrote a whole book about it.
I did. And thank you for asking, Angela. The book is The Boardroom Journey. And for The Boardroom Journey, I interviewed, and the tagline is Practical Guidance for Women to Secure a Seat at the Table. And I interviewed hundreds of women corporate directors that served on private and or public corporate boards. And I wanted to find out about their enablers and the barriers that they encountered throughout their career as a young professional to an actual executive. And what I found that was interesting was the fact that many of those women thought their careers and their path to board service were very unique to them. And I was able to find many themes that these women were doing that actually got them to a corporate board. And I also interviewed exceptional women that had similar CVs as those that were getting on the boards, but these executives actually did what they thought they needed to do to get on boards, but for whatever reason, for at least a 5-year period, couldn't make that jump. And I found there were themes that they had and things that they were doing and not doing. And I wrote a book about how to take those recipes and themes and actually do things differently to actually get better results. And one of the chapters in the book was around surrounding yourself with the right supporting cast, allies, sponsors, role models, mentors, and to really think about naysayers as well, and how to get to recognize when you have frenemies, and how to get rid of some of the naysayers and doomsayers in your life. And oftentimes the biggest one is yourself, and how to stop the stinking thinking and the stories that you're telling yourself, and the imposter syndrome and different things like that. This book dives into all those areas because I found that those who've gotten on the board had gone from being an effective executive to an actual good governance person on boards. They experienced these things and they had natural hacks to get through it. And that's what the boardroom journey is really all about.
You've got stories for days, don't you?
Many after all
I
those.
am certain. Yeah. I'm sure we could talk for hours and hours. I know we're coming up on time though. Bill, was there anything you wanted to ask Keith or wrap up?
Well, I think we probably have to wrap up. What I want to ask him is, how come I didn't know about this book sooner? Maybe, my bet is, and this probably is a whole other conversation. My bet is, yes, there are things that are unique to females pursuing board positions, but there probably are themes that would apply to males and females.
Bill, what I uncovered there was, even though I interviewed hundreds of women, the frameworks and the concepts, the action steps apply to anyone and everyone,
Right.
Yeah,
So I appreciate knowing that. I'm imagining there's going to be a lot of people who are very motivated to get a copy of that book here.
I hope so. I wrote it to help people do things differently to get different results. And
Yeah, fantastic.
so far, so great.
Well, was there anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to, make sure that we cover here at the end?
No, I think, well, one, I love this and I appreciate the questions. It really does come down to reflecting on who you are and what brings you joy and where are you trying to go and why. Taking the time to reflect will give you the opportunity to better understand you, better understand how you show up, understand where your strengths are, and then what are those areas that we can call weaknesses or can use a bit more development, and where are those gaps. And then because you have such a good understanding of you could do a much better job picking your next mentor and accepting your next sponsor. And I'm going to challenge everyone to be judicious about who they accept. Just because someone wants to mentor you and hitch their wagon to you doesn't mean that they're right for you. And so it also means you have to have the intestinal fortitude to say no when to say no. And in the book, I write about a scenario where if someone wants to mentor you and you've seen them in the business setting, and every time that they talk, everyone starts to look at their phone or check out, you may not want that person to be your mentor, even though they want you. So
Right.
I think it works on both sides. Both parties should do their due diligence.
Yeah,
Awesome.
noticing behaviors is definitely something that, we highly encourage. Bill, we've talked about this in past episodes as well. Yeah, I think we're on the right track, Bill. That's what I'm hearing.
Let's hope so.
You mean
we'll
we were
check in
right?
with Keith and make sure that we're not doing this up.
Yeah. Well, with that, thank you for listening to this episode of Mentoring in Real Life. If you have thoughts or questions, feel free to leave us a comment or send us an email, which we've included in the show notes. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe, rate the podcast, and share with a friend. Until next time, help others climb.